life-threatening flooding. The relentless rain in Florida leads to flash flooding as part of the Sunshine State breaks records, and there's no relief in sight.
Non-stop precipitation, which means more flooding is likely, more daily rainfall records are likely.
Plus intense heat from coast to coast. The CBS Evening News starts now. The threat of catastrophic damage with torrential downpours and rising floodwaters across South Florida. That's where we begin. Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us. Tonight, more than 2 million people are under flood warnings and alerts, with streets and entire neighborhoods underwater. In Miami, more than a foot of rain fell in the last 24 hours, and Fort Lauderdale is declaring a state of emergency. They're telling people to stay off the roads. Apartment buildings and homes became their own islands, surrounded by floodwaters. Hundreds of flights across the state are delayed or canceled, stranding passengers. Similar scenes along Florida's Gulf Coast. Emergency crews responding to drivers trapped in their cars. And that area could see more than 2 feet of rain in the days ahead. CBS Miami's Larry Seward is near Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where the rain shut down a section of the interstate.
Relentless storms pounded South Florida today, dumping more than half a foot of rain from coast to coast on the already waterlogged state. Flash flood warnings were issued for parts of Miami-Dade and Broward counties, where rainfall rates of several inches an hour submerged streets and snarled traffic. Massive flooding causing a massive headache on Interstate 95, officials shutting part of the highway after it became too dangerous. Cars in Hallandale Beach had trouble keeping up, waters there stranding drivers on the sides of roads. While in nearby Hollywood, blinding downpours inundated entire neighborhoods. The rain forcing ground stops at both Miami and Fort Lauderdale airports, causing delays in excess of 7 hours.
We were looking at renting a vehicle to try to make it even to Orlando, maybe get on a flight, but that isn't going to work either.
In Lee County on the Gulf Coast, emergency officials had to rescue at least one driver from floodwaters. While further north, a possible tornado brought down trees and power lines in Martin County. The storms are part of a stalled system that's pummeled the Sunshine State, dumping a month's worth of rain in just 24 hours. On Tuesday, the city of Sarasota was swamped. A record nearly 4 inches of rain fell in just 1 hour, a once-in-a-1,000-year event. Here in Dania Beach, where ankle-deep water is still creeping under doors, sandbags are no match for all of this water, and still, there's no end in sight for all of this rain, Nora.
Larry Seward, thank you for being there. Let's now bring in meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel to talk about how long this will last. Good evening, Mike.
Nora, good evening. A very serious weather situation across South Florida today, with flash flood emergencies being declared around Fort Lauderdale and Miami, with excessive rain that's come down for us here. In some places, as much as 14 inches of rain in just the past few hours here, and heavier rain is in the forecast right through the night tonight. Likely going to see some flooding here along the I-75 and I-95 corridors. Heavy population here, huge travel delays, big issues at the airports as well. And this continues through tomorrow. Tomorrow through Friday is South Florida in particular that gets hit. Continues Friday into Saturday, with isolated pockets of about another foot in our forecast here. There's also a lot of heat coming to us here over the next several days, especially into the weekend and beyond. Life-threatening heat, especially into the Midwest, where temperatures here will soar, Nora, into the mid-90s by next Monday.
Big concern, Mike Bettis. Thank you. There's breaking news now from northern Illinois, where 3 police officers are recovering from gunshot wounds. The officers were shot after responding to complaints that a person was threatening to kill themselves or someone else in a gated community in the city of Dixon. All of the officers are in good condition tonight. The suspect was also wounded and taken to the hospital. The big news making international headlines: a nuclear-powered Russian submarine and 3 Russian ships arrived in Cuba today. What are these warships doing so close to the United States? CBS's David Martin reports tonight from the Pentagon.
Having passed just 30 miles off Florida, a 4-ship Russian flotilla pulled into Havana today, led by a warship and a submarine, both armed with guided missiles, and greeted by a 21-gun salute. While the submarine is nuclear-powered, U.S. officials say there's no indication it is carrying nuclear weapons.
We, of course, take it seriously, but these exercises don't pose a threat to the United States.
It's not the first time Russian warships have pulled into Cuba. But U.S. officials say this appears intended by Vladimir Putin as a high-profile response to the Biden administration's support for Ukraine. The frigate has been used in the past to test one of Russia's newest hypersonic missiles.
We're always constantly going to monitor any foreign vessels operating near U.S. territorial waters.
2 American destroyers plus 2 ships specially equipped with sonar for tracking the submarine, along with Navy patrol planes, even sail drones, shadowed the Russian flotilla as it made its way across the Atlantic into the Caribbean. The Russian ships are expected to remain in Havana until next week before getting underway again, perhaps for Venezuela. When they do, officials say, the U.S. Navy will start shadowing them again. A nuclear-powered submarine in Havana evokes memories of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, but National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said today there is no evidence Russia is transferring nuclear missiles to Cuba. Nora?
But everybody watching very closely. David Martin, thank you. President Biden is overseas tonight for a summit in Italy. He has not taken any questions from reporters since his son, Hunter Biden, was found guilty on federal gun charges. The president appears to be accepting the outcome of his son's trial without complaint, while Hunter Biden tonight is back in L.A. as he prepares for his next trial on tax evasion charges. CBS's Nancy Cordes is traveling with the president.
Family affairs gave way to international affairs today as President Biden arrived in Brindisi, Italy, one day after rushing to Wilmington, Delaware to comfort his son. 54-year-old Hunter Biden is now facing the possibility of prison time after a jury found him guilty of lying about his drug use when he filed paperwork to buy a gun 6 years ago.
The president and the first lady support their son.
On board Air Force One today, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked whether President Biden, who ruled out a pardon last week, might consider commuting his son's sentence.
Look, I haven't spoken to the president about this. The sentencing hasn't even been scheduled yet. I just don't have anything beyond that.
The punishment for Hunter Biden's 3 gun felonies could range from probation or home detention up to 25 years behind bars. And he's facing another trial this fall on 9 tax evasion charges to which he has pled not guilty.
We have additional trials and investigative work to be done.
Congressional Democrats expressed sympathy today.
It's a tragedy to the Biden family, but it's a tragedy many American families have been through.
House Democrats believe in the rule of law, and so we will respect that ruling.
Even Republicans, for the most part, held their fire.
This jury verdict is not something we should celebrate.
This verdict came just 2 weeks after their presumptive presidential nominee, Donald Trump, was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in order to cover up hush money payments to an adult film star.
The judge in Delaware played it straight down the middle, didn't play favorites.
Here in Italy, President Biden is set to spend the next couple of days engaged in deep diplomacy with his fellow G7 world leaders. In fact, tomorrow he is expected to sign an agreement that will commit the U.S. to supporting Ukraine for the next 10 years, Nora.
Nancy Cordes traveling with the president. Thank you. Now we'll look at tonight's other top stories. Strikes along Israel's northern border are fueling fears of a widening war. The terrorist group Hezbollah fired more than 200 rockets into Israel today in response to an airstrike that killed a senior commander. CBS's Chris Livesay is in Tel Aviv.
Nora, take a look at this video of Israelis celebrating a holiday when a barrage of Hezbollah rockets appeared overhead. The Israeli Iron Dome shot down most of the rockets, but the attacks between the two sides have been escalating recently. This as Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is in the region pushing for a ceasefire.
A surprising twist in that rush hour bus hijacking in Atlanta yesterday. Police say the suspect was an eyewitness at the scene of a separate violent incident hours earlier. CBS's Dave Malkoff is there.
Police say the suspect hijacked a bus just like this one, Nora, and that set off a chase through 3 Atlanta area counties.
This is the first guy on the scene right here.
Several news outlets interviewed 39-year-old Anthony Greer before the hijacking when he was an eyewitness at the scene of another shooting at a downtown Atlanta mall. According to investigators, Greer boarded the bus and got into an argument with 58-year-old passenger Ernest Bird Jr. Witnesses told police Greer then took a gun from Bird and began threatening other passengers. Then he shot Bird and ordered the bus operator to drive. Bird died from his injuries. Greer was arrested at the scene.
And tonight, the sports world is mourning the death of NBA legend Jerry West at the age of 86. The NBA icon was elected into the Basketball Hall of Fame 3 times as a player and an executive. CBS's Carter Evans is in Los Angeles at Crypto.com Arena, where his legacy lives on.
A lot of people are going to recognize this statue of Jerry West. Nora, that's because this iconic image inspired the NBA logo. The artist who created it says he traced this photo of West in action in 1969. On the hardwood, West was known as Mr. Clutch, making tough shots. As an executive, he was behind 2 Lakers dynasties, including with Magic Johnson, who said today, West was there in my lowest moment when I announced my HIV diagnosis, and we cried together for hours. In the 90s, West saw greatness in a 17-year-old named Kobe Bryant and teamed him up with Shaquille O'Neal.
And thanks to our CBS News teams from around the globe. Back here in Washington, the Republican-led House voted today to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. Now, the move comes after Garland refused to turn over audio of President Biden's interview with investigators in his classified documents case. Democrats called the effort a political stunt and said the Justice Department has cooperated substantially with GOP requests in their impeachment investigation. Now to some big news on the economy. Inflation slowed in May, with the price of goods and services up 3.3% over 1 year ago. The Federal Reserve kept its key interest rates unchanged and forecast just 1 rate cut by the end of the year. One of the big concerns is the continued high cost of housing and the insurance that goes with it. In tonight's Money Watch, CBS's Jolene Kent shows us what homeowners can do.
In Washington today, Fed Chair Jerome Powell predicted interest rates will come down only once this year as inflation improves.
What's your message to Americans who are seeing encouraging economic data but don't feel good about this economy?
I don't think anyone knows, has a definitive answer why people are not as happy about the economy as they might be. And we've got an economy that's growing at a solid pace, and we're doing everything we can to bring that inflationary episode fully to a halt. And in the meantime, it's going to be painful for people.
Among the most painful realities, homeowners insurance.
My policy was $1,800 and it renewed at $6,000.
What did you think when you saw that number?
I kind of thought it was a joke. This is crazy.
Joy Sharp knows the struggle as both a North Carolina homeowner and an insurance agent.
It really is a burden. People on fixed incomes, people that maybe just lost their job, they're really having a hard time making these payments.
With many parts of the country seeing more extreme weather and heavier damage, premiums are going through the roof. Nationwide, the average home insurance policy rose 11% last year. Currently, for $300,000 of coverage, the average premium is $2,200 a year. If rates go up 11% this year, that's an additional $245. To lower your insurance costs, consider bundling your home and auto insurance, investing in weatherproofing your home, including storm windows and drains, and shop around for quotes, little things that can lead to big savings.
I tweaked some of my coverages, and I was able to apply some different discounts that I didn't qualify for before.
As for that one expected interest rate cut, I asked Chairman Powell when consumers can expect it, and he told me he doesn't have a precise date yet. He just needs the confidence that inflation is moving down to his 2% target. And as we know, inflation as of last month, still 3.3%, Nora.
But there could be a rate cut around
September is what the market is looking for.
Jolene Kent, thank you so much. The Port of Baltimore is officially back in business nearly 3 months after that devastating bridge collapse. That's next. The Port of Baltimore was declared officially reopened today, 11 weeks after the deadly collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The roughly $160 million cleanup required the removal of almost 50,000 tons of steel and concrete debris. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says shipping traffic that was rerouted to other ports will likely soon return to Baltimore. Eye on America is next. As we return to Paradise, California, the site of the 2018's Camp Fire, we meet the residents still working to rebuild their lives. The Camp Fire in 2018 was the deadliest in California's history. 85 people died and entire communities were destroyed. In part 2 of our visit to Paradise, CBS's Jonathan Vigliotti introduces us to people who chose not to rebuild and tracks the relocations of former residents who now find themselves confronting the threat of calamity posed by climate change. Here's tonight's Eye on America.
Oh, look at that, Mom. Look at that, look at that. Images like this show how extreme weather ravages main streets across America. In the last 5 years, at least 5 towns in 4 states have been nearly erased from the map. All of them after Paradise, California fell.
So at first I thought we were just gonna, evacuate maybe for a day or two and then come back home.
Justin Miller's childhood home in Paradise was destroyed. He's one of the many who chose not to return, now making his home in nearby Oroville.
Was there ever a thought in your mind of staying in Paradise, of returning?
At first we were thinking, after the lot was cleared off, we could rebuild there, but, then we realized the town would take a while to rebuild, so it would just be easier to move to someplace like here in Oroville.
Just last year, extreme weather forced 2.5 million Americans from their homes. And new research finds nearly half of all American homes are threatened by climate change.
Paradise was that place in the 90s for my family where they could afford their own small house.
Justin's older brother, Ryan, a PhD candidate in geography, is now studying this climate migration.
This is research that is deeply personal for you.
Yeah. Why were we in a situation where the affordable place was also the place that had this huge hazard?
Ryan and his team used postal records to track where people moved.
We think this covers about 2/3 of all the households in Paradise.
What he found in many cases, a move didn't solve the problem. It put people back in harm's way.
I'm seeing a lot of households moved into areas that are also threatened by other kinds of disasters.
Well,
here in Florida, you have hurricanes, Tennessee, Kentucky, you have tornadoes. What does that say to you?
Maybe we're in a situation where increasingly people are finding that in their search for affordable housing, they sort of have to live in an area that's exposed to one of these climate-driven hazards. We're going to see more potential paradises happening where we have these communities exposed to this threat that the community might not be prepared to face.
All right. Paradise residents Kylie and Ellie Warble largely picked up the pieces on their own, including removing dead trees and vegetation from their property as they applied for and waited to receive federal aid.
Has the meaning of home changed for you?
Yes, a lot. Home for me was kind of like a place we live in, but home will always be wherever my mom is.
5 years on, Paradise families have scattered, the fabric of this small town frayed.
In Jesus' name, amen.
But don't tell that to the Warbles, pioneers of a new American community they hope is resilient to climate-fueled storms. For Eye on America, I'm Jonathan Vigliotti, Paradise, California.
A New York nonprofit brings the love of sports to children of all abilities. That's next.
If you can't watch the CBS Evening News, you can listen. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Finally, tonight's Heart of America. Meet the family making sports accessible for all kids. Founded in Scarsdale, New York in 2020, Able Athletics was grown out of brothers Christian and Rowan Diaz's love for the game lacrosse and their younger sister, Elle. They wanted their sister and other kids with disabilities to have the same opportunities as they do. 4 years later, the nonprofit offers a variety of sports for athletes of all abilities, including lacrosse, volleyball, flag football, field hockey, and basketball. Rowan and Christian told us it's all because of Elle.
We started with lacrosse since that's a sport that me and my brother play. And we just found that when we modified the drills and the equipment that we used with her, she was able to find success.
Able Athletics and the entire Diaz family, they are tonight's Heart of America. What a great story. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Norah O'Donnell. Good night.